Hi, everyone. I'd like to describe in this video today the easiest way to understand the house system. And I'm going to go through each house and give you the general idea about each house develops into the next, and the basis for how you can understand all of the different stages that we go through with each house. I just want to preface this by sharing a quick little story about, why I pay attention to the astrological weather. And I think it does make a difference in terms of all the different things that we can be paying attention to in terms of like meteorological weather, political weather, and all the rest. The astrological weather gives us information about what kind of impulses are going to be pulsing through our body from these from these planetary energies. So, if you look at consciousness, like it layers down, you have these celestial bodies which have certain qualities of energy to them. And those qualities of energy dictate, they're part of our consciousness. And, these energies, depending on what's going on, what sort of alignments, conjunctions, so on and so forth, determine what kind of influence energetic influences are going to be running through our system on a consciousness level. And so, um, whether or not, we listen to the astrological weather can play a difference in how we can experience the astrological weather, the celestial weather, and what kind of responses we can produce, right? So if we're aware of something coming, it really gives us a heads up as to what we're going to be facing internally in terms of like energy moving through us and how to deal with that versus not being aware and then having some really powerful force come in and then just being swept up by that energy. So um, there's an example. So there's a teacher who was teaching students, and this was during the Pluto Mars square. The square is this, hard square. It's a conflict between these two energies that force change into a person's life. If, they're not working with the energies, if they're resisting them in any way, it'll kind of force a change. So that was a hard aspect that came in. I knew it was coming in, and before any, strong aspects hit, I kind of sort of do my internal work to prepare, and just like awareness is the key. And then I can observe as these energies come in, what they're changing from a place of observation and not be reactive to the energies, not get swept up by them. So in the case of this teacher who is unaware of this hard aspect happening, uh, this person is a very calm person, like extremely calm, kind of even monotone. And when this energy came in, he just completely flew off the handle, okay, for at least 30 minutes going off and expressing this deep rage. It was just coming up from within him and took total control of him. And all of his students were sitting there and just observing in shock. And after the 30 minutes was over, and I think he even threw a few things around the classroom, he sits back and just goes into retreat mode. And sure enough, the next day he comes in and he apologizes to everybody and says, I don't know what happened. This hasn't happened in at least 18 years where I've had such an eruption of deep emotion. And so, Pluto really, a Mars Pluto conjunction, Mars Pluto square will really challenge us to, um, work and transmute deeper, more intense energies, the energies that Mars bring in, anger, rage, that willpower that wants to come up, the drive, the fire, and Pluto brings us really deep with them to transform deeper applications of that within ourselves. And so he experienced it. He had no idea it was coming, just totally took control of him. And then he, wasn't prepared, probably definitely went too far with it in the wrong space at the wrong time, right? The timing was really bad. I'm sure there were other things going on within his system, within his life, that he would have preferred using that energy wisely towards. So, long story short, moral of the story is when we pay attention to the cosmic weather, the astrological weather, we can not take things personally, one, because we know they're moving through the collective. And then two, when they do come in, we are going to feel them to different degrees, depending on the specifics of how our chart is laid out. But we're all going to feel it to some degree and some level because it's like weather moving through the sky. Everyone's going to get hit with the rain at the same time. Whether or not you have an umbrella is a different question, or if you have your raincoat with you and all of that, preparation helps. And so everyone's getting hit with it at the same time, but then we'll be able to react differently and use the energies wisely. So when certain transits are happening, my phone will ring, and because I pay attention to the astrological weather, I'll be able to tell people, okay, first of all, this isn't personal. Don't take it personal. This is happening to us collectively. It's raining on everybody. And what is it doing specifically for you? What is it bringing up? What is it, getting you to work on? And allowing space between what it's bringing up and you, the higher self, observing what it's bringing up really allows us to work with the energies efficiently and move through whatever we have to move through. Sometimes it is powerful and it does take control, but constantly going into that space of observation where there's a certain amount of detachment, we can see the energies affecting us in different ways. And that space gives us time to properly respond versus getting swept away with it and reacting and then, being dissatisfied with that experience. So that is one reason to, just as an example, to pay attention to the astrological weather, right? And it's happening to everybody, and everyone's going to experience it in different ways. And there's such a relief in that. And so when I speak to people that are experiencing different things, and I'm like, yeah, everyone's calling right now, and everybody's talking about these themes, or everybody's experienced a certain amount of intensity right now, everybody just relaxes a little bit and can have, there's greater contemplation and wisdom that can come through. So that being said, I highly recommend people follow the transits, and it doesn't have to be religiously, but if you feel intense energies coming on, paying attention to what's happening in the sky can help to like work through things, right? And to better understand ourselves, to better know ourselves. And the more that we know ourselves, the more we can act in according with a greater map, if you will, of your personal system and how you operate. And there is a certain amount of wisdom that comes through with that. Over time, not being reactive to things allows, an adequate response to different situations as they arise. So, easiest way to understand the house system. I grabbed this image in particular from Astral Arcanum. I'm just going to say that I didn't create this, but it was beautiful, so I decided to use it. You have the house system from 1 to 12, and there's a constellation based on the seasons that is dedicated to each house. And one is spring, um, going all the way through summer, Cancer, Libra, fall, and Capricorn, winter. Okay, so there's a lot of different ways to look at this, but the easiest way that I've found is to understand the first house is when you were born. And I'd like you to picture a baby. A baby comes into the world. So that baby is a unique individual. It has its own identity just by the fact that it's been born with all of its uniqueness, and it's not like exactly like any other. Um, and there's a physical body, right? The baby is a physical body. At the beginning, there's not much going on, right? And so it moves into the second house, and the second house is really sustenance, right? So keyword here is sustenance and nourishment. And what is it doing? It's nourishing off its mother's milk. It's nourishing off the warmth of family members, and it's really connected to um, this ability to receive sustenance from its family. And then the baby starts to develop. So I'm going through it as the development of the baby. And that's at the base of the house system, and how I find it easiest to understand and why I want to share with you. The third house is when the baby starts babbling, right? So first it's born, it's just this body, it starts drinking milk, it starts sleeping in your arms, and then it starts a blah, 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 right? It starts babbling. And that babbling is, the first signs of its, some sort of vocal expression, aside from the crying. And then we move into the fourth house, and the fourth house is really this connection emotionally, the development emotionally that happens through the mother, but through the family, through the home. And so there's an emotional, the baby will be happy, the baby will be sad, right? Depending on how its needs are being met. And that starts to create the emotional aspect of that person. And then when you move into the fifth house, the baby then starts to play, right? The family members will play with the baby. The baby itself will start to play with different toys, and it starts to become creative in its own sense of what it wants and desires and what brings it joy. And, it seeks out things that'll make it happy and laugh. And then we go into the sixth house, and the sixth house is more related to the routines and the cycles that happen within the home. So the family wakes up, whatever routines and rituals are in place, the baby will experience that as this cyclical pattern that creates routine, that creates a foundation for some sort of challenge, because there's structure that needs to be followed. And then the baby in the seventh house is brought outside the house, or people come to visit the baby within the house. And there's an interplay, there's a relationship at this point between self and other. And in that, there's a greater understanding of self, and there's also an exploration of others. And then the foundation for what relationships are start to build within that person, right? All of these create patterns that then spiral out. And then the eighth house is a deeper connection to people and sensing emotional uh, connections to those in their environment and outside their home, um, by way of understanding this deeper interconnected web, and also how the baby needs other people to take care of it. And where in the first house, the second house is, the sustenance, and the third house, the emotional needs. The fourth house is, the third house is the communicative needs. Fourth house is the emotional needs. In the eighth house, it starts to develop into these deeper needs and desires and deeper understanding of the baby's connection to its parents. If one of its parents' moods change, the baby's mood will change right away. So there's this intrinsic, we start to understand the intrinsic connection between self and other, which is a layer deeper than just the relationship superficial aspect of the seventh house. And then it goes into the ninth house, and we might talk about daycare here, right? Or some environment where the child is being brought in with other children to learn about certain things in the world. And they might be brought to church. They might be brought to just different groups and gatherings where they are learning about other people and different kinds of structures that are outside the home that create foundations to who they are and belief systems. Um, and then the 10th house is really the furthest away from that emotional connection to the home and family. And so it could be when the mom leaves the child alone with another person, and they're not familiar in their environment, and they feel this sense of really who they are in contrast to the world being separated, right? They're now their own person. They're separate. The mom's not there. The siblings aren't there. And they're with strangers. So they get this broader sense of who they are, but they still have this connection to the family. So they know who they are through the first six houses, and what they experience at home is then brought and channeled forth through them as a unique individual out into the world. And then as you move into the 11th house, the mother and father might bring that baby around and travel around, and that baby is brought to different places, different friend groups, um, and gets to see this broader aspect of, what is out there in the world and who is out there. And also, this starts to develop within them a kind of sense of I don't want to say belonging, a sense of desire as to self and other, and all these different environments create a place, a space where they can begin to contrast themselves with their family, themselves with immediate environments, and then this greater world. So, um, you know, large concerts, um, even traveling, further and further away from the home, are just going to places where there's a lot of people, and it's a different environment, it's a different atmosphere, and there's different things going on. Um, will help develop within that child this sense of greater understanding. And then in the 12th house, this for a baby really represents the sleep cycle, right? And they go back into sleep, they connect with their dreams, they connect with their inner world and this greater aspect of self, which connects to spirit and what's beyond this world. And so every night they go and reconnect with that aspect. And they can also travel very, very far away from the home. They can go into meditative states where they're really just connected, interconnected, feeling the sense, and really being in that interconnectedness with the world, and not quite separate, from the self. They're still very interconnected at this point for a child. So you can look at this like the 12 months of the year, and as a baby develops, they move through all these different stages, right? They go from the body to the sustenance, to the communication, to the emotions, to the creativity, to the work and challenges and routines, to the broader relationships, to the greater interconnection of things outside of that, and then to these greater moments of learning and these greater moments of identity in the 10th house. And then these greater increased awareness of, not just family unit and other, but like, these broader groups. And then back into the 12th house, back into the sleep cycle, back into the self, back into the greater connection with spirit and the cosmos and, all that they are. And then they cycle through. So as each year goes by, the child then begins to develop. It's like layers on a cake, with every birthday, there's like a new layer, and each house then develops more and more. So, the first house, in a child's teenage years could be about working out because the identity in the body and the self, that process becomes refined. And, or it could be how they dress, right? How they develop their sense of style, um, how they feel, like what their identity is, and how other people see them. Because the first house is what you see, when you're looking at someone. That's why the ascendant sign is, in a way, kind of colors more of when you're looking at people who they are than their sun sign often does. And so whatever is on the ascendant is really dictating these kind of, superficial layers, but then also the relationship with self, with body. Um, and so, the second house, as that develops in teenage years, the sustenance becomes a lot different and a lot more complicated. And this is where it starts interconnecting to personal values, integrity, morals, and all of that, and our own ability to generate abundance in our life will depend on what our values are. Abundance is gonna look different for everybody, but that starts to develop, from the infant to the child to the teen, right? And then to the adult. It just gets refined. The third house, for example, communication will become so refined. It could be about, someone becoming a teacher in their community, right? So that the highest form, let's say, would be really bringing that communication style, refining it. Um, and here we could see a strong connection to the mind as well, because communication is also our communication with ourselves and our communication with these internal processes. And then the fourth house, later in life could be about, how you bring a sense of hominess, into your space. What sort of development happens on that level will be determined by whatever sign is in your fourth house. But the qualities of that, the connection to home can emotionally run deeper than just the physical home. It can also, get into the emotional relationships you have with your parents, and how those emotional relationships were based on the emotional relationships that your parents had with their parents. And so all of this can be looked at, and it's how we respond to the world, emotionally. Everything. So whenever you're looking at one house, the opposite house is its pairing partner for development, right? So we develop the self, first house, through our relationship, how we develop our relationships in the world with others. You can still develop the self without the help of relationships, but it's a lot harder, right? If you have relationships to reflect and challenge you and help you grow, it's a lot easier to and faster to develop the self, right? Um, Third house communication, for example, can happen a lot easier with the ninth house, which becomes not just the daycare, it becomes these higher learning institutes, right? So it could be studying, researching, going to schools, right? Taking courses and really doing a lot of philosophical work in terms of trying to understand the nature of reality and who you are, and all of that stuff. That reinforces your ability to communicate and your, how you develop in the third house and communication with self. Um, and then that refined expression can come out. So they're always pairing together within your own chart. So you want to look at that as well. But just to continue going around the wheel, I want to give an example of like something that is quality of that house as it develops later on. For the fifth, as a child, finding joy, finding pleasure, and playing at home, develops into the ultimate, which is partnership, romantic play, sexual play, life force, and creative endeavors. For example, writing a book, bringing something extremely creative from the self into the world. And so it becomes this refined, what brings us joy, and what sparks us, the life force that sparks us to life is really our pathway to who we are uniquely as an individuated person. So the fifth house then, becomes about this refined creative individuality that we bring forth. In the sixth house, where it's challenges and chores and routines, as a child, just experiencing that through the mother and what we have to go through, with their schedule, becomes the basis for how we develop our routines and our daily rituals, right? And the challenges we have to face with chores, with homework, and then, further on with work projects, right? And how we manage our daily schedules and the daily routines we have vis-a-vis that. Do we need to work out in order to have the energy to later on produce X amount of, material to, for work or whatever? This all comes into play. And that's the first, from 1 to 6. It's really a lot happening within the self and within the home. And then later stages of development in the seventh house, we look at really strong work liaisons. We look at marriage. We look at long-term friendships and relationships. And this is intimate relationships, it is all relationships, but we're in its refined aspect. We're looking at the development of how we manage our relationships, who we are in our relationships, what we've learned through our relationships, and what we can, how we can find that reciprocity with others through relationships. So that's, later development, and that all reinforces, again, the first house, the self, and the development of the self. How we balance the self and the other, right? That's that balancing act. It's always creating like a balancing act when we look at the opposite house. How are we balancing those two in order to bring out the best in those houses? And we're also looking at what astrological sign, what constellation was in the sky in that portion of the sky when we were born at the exact time reflects the color of that house. So, depending what astrological sign you had in your seventh house will create, it's just flavors your relationships with, you can have a scorpionic flavored seventh house, you can have Capricorn there, Cancer, and they all have different qualities to them, and they're all ruled by different elements. And so a lot comes through by studying, not just understanding how this house system works, but understanding, the different signs and what each astrological sign represents. It's that different layer. And then whatever planets we have in whatever house within our chart are like the spices, right? That they're really the energy that's emanating through the strongest in our charts. So if we have like a stellium in the seventh house, there's going to be huge emphasis on relationships. It doesn't mean we're going to have a lot of relationships. It just means we're going to learn a lot through relationships. There will be an emphasis within ourselves on those relationships. It could mean that the person is going to experience a lot of relationships, but it doesn't necessarily mean that. It just means that the emphasis will be there. And so then if I go to the seventh house, sorry, not the seventh house, the eighth house, my throat is really dry right now. This is winter dryness coming in. The eighth house, as I mentioned, our deeper needs with others and this understanding that I can't survive, without my family. And this deeper level, if I leave the house and my parents lose me as a baby, that's it, right? I could be gone to the world, or I could die. So we start to really develop this bonding, this deeper bonding with people through these deeper unsaid contracts. As a child growing up, we understand that we are financially bound to our parents until we're independent enough to produce, produce money for ourselves, and then begin to become independent and move out of the house. And so, there's this deeper bond that we learn there through our teens. And then different contracts that we have. Excuse me, different contracts that we have when we move out of the house with work, for example. We might sign, work contracts with people. And so there's a bond, a deeper bond. And also the eighth house is, the deeper psychological bonds we have and understanding the world and how we're interconnected and interbound to people that are within our lives. And what that teaches us psychologically about who we are. And then, of course, the deeper bonding that happens after marriage, after the seventh house, is like this, divine sexual union and the creation of another being into the world binds two people together in a way like no other. And so it's all of these deeper bonds that create power dynamics and psychological dynamics with people that develop later on. So look at your eighth house. It's also teaching us these bonds that we have to the universe, these deeper bonds that we have to the universe, and how that energy is interplaying with deeper cycles, with nature. And so that's why the eighth house is also known as, any unseen knowledge, any psychic knowledge, any occult knowledge that we can have often is this learning process that's happening through the eighth house. And then again, I mentioned briefly already that the ninth house is this higher learning, the higher institutions, the philosophy, the religion, but it's generally our belief systems that develop over time. And the 10th house, as we cycle around from birth till death, we keep on refining this process of coming out into the world and being separate, being a unique individual, and what we bring forth, again, funnels through from all these years of development within our childhood and who we present ourselves to be in the world and how people perceive us, in terms of when you're looking out, you see all these different people and everybody looks so different and they have different qualities that they're bringing forth. They have their character and their personality. And that's what creates this, image that we create as them in our minds. But it's also that process that is happening within us each time we step out into the world. There's a refinement process about, as we cycle through all these layers, we keep on learning. We keep on spiraling and spiraling. So we always in some way transform and are renewed and go through different death and rebirth cycles. And we create a strong, if we have a strong foundation, we can create more in the world. And so the 10th house is all about what we're doing in this, larger scale. But again, if you look at the fourth house, it roots truly in this emotional connection, the emotional intelligence that we have with ourselves, right? There's a strong connection, those two opposing houses. Um, how we treat ourselves emotionally, is often how we are going to either treat others, from the 10th house, from the global stage, or how others will treat us. Sometimes it gets reflected back that way. And so there's this beautiful dance between the opposing houses that you have to look at. Excuse me. And then the 11th house is, the highest development of it is, our goals and our dreams, right? So we start as a child, we're being taken to our first, group event or concert or whatever, a large gathering, and we experience it that way, like, wow, the amazement of like, wow, there's all of this greater, these greater groups and connections, and who we are in relation to that. It's also refining our identity from the 10th house. We go into the 11th house and we realize that we can't develop the self without others. So we go back to the fifth house and the intelligence of the fifth house. We can't develop the self without experiencing, all these different groups and tribes in the world, right? That's what gives us the reflection to then say, I am this, I am not that, right? And of course, I always mention to everybody, move towards what you like, move towards what you feel good with. If you have something contrasting and you don't like it, you don't have to go and fight, pick up, pick up battle with everything that you don't like in the world. Move towards what you like and what you enjoy, and you will find yourself, your center more quickly, rather than picking fight with everything that you don't like. That's just a waste of energy. And yes, there are some battles that we have to fight, but that will be for different reasons. So the 11th house gives us a contrast to the fifth house, and it's our hopes and wishes. And it is also, our ability to create a wealth of knowledge, a wealth of abundance, a wealth of joy. And that's where we learn that we are not an island unto ourselves. We're always connected and interconnected to other people. And in order to do anything in this world, we need to have developed a certain amount of relationships with the people around us and have those balanced and reciprocated in order to be able to find opportunities, provide opportunities, and create movements, greater movements. The 11th house is the collective. It starts off with networks, but then it develops. You're like, wow, this is the um, collective trends moving through, collective awareness. And it goes quite deep. If we take it into the cosmos, this is also, it's kind of that Uranian energy of, these trends and movements and tipping points, and all these systems at play that are governing large groups of people. Like we look at the financial system, yes, 10th house, but it's also the 11th house, is the people that are withholding it, not withholding it, the people that are upholding whatever system. It could be government, it could be institutions, it's just all these larger groups. And the more refined 12th house is, not just dreams as a baby and meditative states and just being in oneness. We're so connected to everything. We don't really have a developed sense of self to see ourselves different from our mother at the beginning, from our siblings, and that differentiation starts to happen, the individuation starts to happen, and then we can begin to differentiate. But when we're a baby, it's just oneness. And so the 12th house is like this beautiful energy as a child. And as we get older, it becomes more refined. It can become our mystical experiences, those magical experiences we have in the world, where we have a near-death experience, we go out of body and we see ourselves looking at our bodies from above. We have in dreams, we have astral traveling, we have all these different layers of realms that we interact with, the multidimensionality of ourselves is then explored through the 12th house. And this is where we can go into, uh, induced states of, a deeper connection with the self that isn't so much oneness like the baby was experiencing it. It's now that person they have a developed sense of identity, but they're returning to it, and they can have these experiences through, fasting, even through 12th house could be depression, but it's really this alchemical process, these stages of awareness that get activated. It's our divine blueprint, it's our soul blueprint, right? And it's also again, moments of isolation, right? And moments of challenge, deep spiritual, challenging moments come through in the 12th house later on in an adult's life. Um, and so with every year passing, like just imagine you're a 30-year-old and you've gone through this wheel 30 times. So each time you go through the first house, it's going to develop further and further. The same with the second house, you know, the sustenance to sensations. The second house really connected to sensations, right? What kind of fabrics do you like to wear, right? Who are you on a sensorial level? What foods do you eat, and how do they make you feel, right? That is your connection to sustenance, your connection to self, and then sustenance becomes something greater. Where do you generate your income from? Right? And all of this relates back to your connection to, your mother and your father and your siblings, and that initial um, bond of trust with being able to obtain sustenance, right? Obtain mother's milk, be in a warm, caring, loving pair of arms, right? And so as it cycles around, it develops, but all of those initial imprints happen from childhood. That's why I think it's important to look at the astrological house system based on the development of the baby, because it gets the mind to start understanding, okay, each of these qualities from every house then just develop. And how do emotions develop? How does the fourth house develop? What stages does it go through to develop? And you can take it from baby all the way to an elder, right? A wise person, and all those stages of development that they went through. So you have to look as well at, where the person is at, what age they're at, to determine how the qualities of that house are going to be showing up for them. Some of the more infantile things that we might experience when we're younger related to that house won't be showing up for someone more likely than not in their older years, right? They've already gone through those first initial stages of learnings within that house provides. So we have to look at, where we're at and the more developed and refined learnings that are coming through those houses. Um, and so I think I'm going to leave it at that, but I just wanted to share this for people that I've done astrology readings for, and that want to get into the house system a little bit more and maybe follow the astrological weather happening and understand, when you're listening to your ascendant sign, because all astrology readings are based on your ascendant. So, if someone's giving an astrology weather report, don't listen to your sun sign or your moon sign, because they're basing their analysis on where the planets are going to be and in what house, depending on what astrological sign you have on the ascendant. That's determining what houses those planets are going to fall into. Um, so it's really important to look at your ascendant sign. And so hopefully this will help people follow the astrological weather, be able to assign, the themes that are showing up depending on where the planets are falling in into what house, and to begin to just reflect and then create that space between these energies flowing in and how we're experiencing them and what the lessons are, and for us specifically, and how we can respond differently, and create that sort of healthy detachment to the impulses pumping through this great big system, which is the world and the planets and the solar system and beyond. So I hope that helps. And please contact me if you want an astrology reading. I put a bunch of different types of sessions that you can purchase. If you just want to look at your transits, that's one thing. If you want the full enchilada, that's where I compare a bunch of different systems. I look at, the Mayan, the gene key, the human design, and the Western astrology, and sometimes the Vedic, and I really just see what patterns are showing up. Because like with any system, I could throw T on the table, and if I understand that system, I'll be able to understand what exactly is happening. Everything is reflecting back to us. So what I like about astrology is there's a lot of detail, right, that we can gain and hone information from. It's very specific. So the deeper the system, the more information we can obtain from it. And I also added a new soul story offering to my website, which I love doing. I've been doing for a really long time within myself and friends and family. And I've recently started offering it as a service to people who have come into contact with me. And it's just such a wonderful, for me, experience of sharing what I've been doing with myself to others, to develop that connection, that deeper connection from the conscious awareness to the subconscious and into the soul, and really honing that soul connection that we all have, and to move through these layers, these veils that we might have within ourselves, and to understand the symbols that connect us to our deeper template, the mythologies that are encoded within us, and these archetypal energies. So thank you, and wishing you all a wonderful November. My website is inspiringplayfulevolutions.com. Take care.